So I've been working on this miter squared blanket for a while because I've been trying to destash, and it's getting massive. I'm just finishing the edging for it, and I'm doing it in this blue acrylic all the way around. It's mainly made out of acrylic, which is what I don't normally use, but it's going to work out well for my son because he won't have to take as much care of it as what he would have to if it was hand spun, and it'll be a lot easier for us to clean. Although some wool in this is hand spun, this brown is, but anyway, that's okay. Anyway, I've been really enjoying making these mitered squares because I just find it's a great way to mindlessly knit when I just don't feel like thinking really hard about a lace pattern or what I have to do next or where things have to go. So I'm actually about to start another one, and I thought I'd show you guys how I start one. The main reason why I'm starting another one is because this one's absolutely massive now, and it's a complete pain in the butt to move around with it. So I really just want to put it somewhere and park it and just knit with it there when I'm in the house or whatever. And I really like to have one that I can take with me when I travel. I do have another finer one that I'm working on, but because I'm trying to stash bust, I really want to get started on another bigger blanket that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with yet. My oldest son is maybe not so interested in having one of these, so I might end up giving it away to charity or something. I don't know. I'll do something with it, but yeah, I'm going to start another one, and I thought I would show you guys how I get started with my meter squared blankets. Just one thing to note as well is that this one is done in stocking stitch. You can do them in garter stitch and probably a bunch of other stitches too, so don't let yourself be restricted just by the fact that I do mine with stocking stitch. I like it because it's super stretchy, and I think it just makes it more comforting to have, because yeah, it's super stretchy, so it just feels comforting because it stretches right around you and gives you like a big hug. Anyway, I'll grab out the stuff for my new blanket and I will show you guys how I get started. I think I'm just going to get started with this little bit of yarn here. It is hand spun, and it's just in a really cute color. I think this blanket's going to mostly be made up of yarns that I've bought and a little bit of hand spun stuff that is just a little bit too thick to go into my other hand spun blanket, which is mostly all sort of 4-ply. Okay, so to get started, we're going to grab our needles. The main reason why I like to use these is because I'm only going to cast on 20 stitches for each side like that of the mitered square, so they don't need to be really big needles, and it's just heaps easier when you're in a tight space to use the shorter needles, but it's handy to have it with the cord in between, because then when you're not knitting, so when you leave the project to go and do something else, you can easily just pull the active stitches onto here and they're less likely to just fall off, which is great. Now I just realised I need to get stitch markers because it just makes it so much easier. You don't have to use them if you don't want to, but it's going to make the decreases that you need to do a lot easier to remember. So I just get those out as well. That'll wait. Drink. Okay, so just going to do my normal slip knot, chuck it on there. Then I am going to cast on 19 more, so I've got 20 in total. Oops. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Right, so that's our first 20. Then I'm going to put on a stitch marker, cast on 1, And then I'm going to put on another stitch marker and cast on another 20. Oops. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So I should have 41 stitches. 1, 2, oops. Let's fix those up. That's better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Okay, so this side is going to make one side of your mitered square. The stitch in the middle is just going to be a nice separator for your decreases, and then the other 20 are going to do the other side of your mitered square, and then the other two sides, they just happen naturally as you go up. They're the ends, either end of your actual work. It'll make more sense when we get into it. So for me, the way I think about it is that's my first row, which is always going to be, so we're going to knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl as you normally do, and the knit row is the row that you're going to decrease in, okay, and then the purl row you're not going to. So it's just really easy if you remember it that way. You want to decrease when you're working from the side with the tail. So the reason why I think that way is because if you do garter stitch, you're really going to need to remember that. Okay, so not this row where we go back, it's going to be when I'm knitting from the side that has the tail, that's the side I want to decrease on. And then if you do that all the time, then it's you'll always get that sort of even decrease. You won't get mixed up and accidentally decrease when you're going in the wrong direction. I have taught myself to not actually turn my work, so I don't turn my work to purl. What I'm just going to do for this first one though is I will actually turn my work to purl, which I haven't done in a very long time, but we'll see how that goes, just because that's the way that probably that most people purl, and I don't want to make it too confusing for anyone. So what we're going to do is we are just going to purl all of these stitches, or if you're going to do garter stitch, you just knit them all. I'm actually curious. I've ummed and ahed about doing it, but I don't know, I haven't really felt like it. I wonder whether you could do like moss stitch or something. I wonder, that would look really pretty, but then potentially I don't know whether it would be still as nice and stretchy. Maybe it would be more stretchy. I'm not sure. Moss stitch kind of is not as stretchy, but I'm of two minds. I think it would look pretty, but also I like these blankets because they're not complicated, so I don't think I would want to be thinking too hard about, you know, alternating the stitches like you do in moss stitch. But hey, don't let that hold you back. I mean, it's a pretty simplistic thing that we're doing here. As long as you can do your decreases in the middle when you get to them, then I don't think there's really any problems with stitches. I think I would just be a bit wary of stitches that are going to contract your square a lot. Like, it might be difficult. It might not work well if you did something like cables, maybe. Even though they don't really, that doesn't really take away or add stitches in the grand scheme of things. I'm not sure. You know what? Just experiment with whatever you think. No holds barred. Knit what you want to knit when you want to knit, however you want to knit it, I guess. That's what I do anyway. But yeah, so just a bit of background as well. You know, my shed is an absolute mess, and I'm sure I'm suffering from something that a lot of a lot of us out there suffer from, which is basically just having too much stuff. I've come into a lot of stuff recently, embroidery stuff, which I don't really ever use, so I'm just trying to de-stash more and more stuff as much as I can so my shed can be a little bit tidier, because that makes my brain tidier. It's been causing me quite a bit of stress lately. Okay, so that's the first row done, and I purled it, like I said, because I want to have it as stocking stitch, but you could knit it or whatever you want to do. So you can see we're at this end here with the little tail. So this is the end that we are going to decrease on. Okay, so, and it's super simple. All we're going to do is knit until we're 2 stitches away from that stitch marker. So knit, 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 knit. Do. Almost there. You know, my other blanket is driving me insane as well, because I only have long needles for it, and yeah, it's just a pain. If you can use the short needles, or you can get shorter needles, like no longer than this, to sort of knit with for these blankets, it'll be a lot easier. So all we're going to do, so we're 2 stitches away from that stitch marker that we put in, and we are just going to knit 2 together, and then we're going to knit this one in the middle, drop across our stitch marker, and then we're going to pick this stitch up, knit, and then drop that stitch that we didn't knit back over. Okay, and then we are just going to knit to the end, and that's pretty much it. So you're just going to keep on doing that, decreasing 1 on each side when you do your from right to left. Well, you're always going to do right to left. Let me say this properly. When you are doing your knit row, if you're going to do it in stocking stitch, or when you're knitting starting from the tail, you're just going to decrease on either side of those stitch markers, on the outside of the 2 stitch markers, and just knit the one in the middle. Okay, so I don't know whether you guys ever have thought about working without turning your work. It gets hit. It's I totally recommend it for these sort of blankets. I'm totally screwing it up right now, but anyway, that's okay, because I'm trying to talk and think and knit at the same time. Just give myself a little bit more space here. But anyway, it's super handy with these blankets, because once they get to a certain size, it's a bit of a pain to turn them. So so I purl this way without turning, and I'm usually a lot better at it. Let's just try and do that again. So you basically just go into the back of the stitch, go over the front, and that's it. It's the same as purling from the back. And when I'm not trying to think so hard, it's reasonably quick to get that done. So yeah, so now we are just going to purl this entire row all the way. Oh, it's also a little bit hard to do when when you're just starting and you don't have much to anchor it down. Now, another thing you can think about too is you don't have to do 20 stitches. You could do 30 each side. For each side, you could do 50, you could do 150 for each side. That's entirely up to you. I like to do 20. It just makes a nice size square, I think, but it all depends on what you want to do, right? So it would take a long time to finish a square that's got 150 stitches on each side. I mean, that's 301 stitches you've got to cast on there, which sounds a bit ugly. But something else you can do too, which I maybe will do a video on later, because I might do it with this blanket as well, is you can, as long as the stitches you have go into each other, you could do 3 rows and then you could do 3 rows like this one, and this one, and say I had 20 stitches in each square, or each side of each square. You could then, if you wanted to, at the end of those 3 rows where they line up together, you could cast on a square that had 60 stitches in it, and then 1, and then 60 along here, and you just pick up your stitches from the others. We'll talk about a little bit of that later, but yeah, I could totally do a square that went over 2 rows as long as the squares in the row, the sides and the squares of the rows was equally divisible into the number of stitches on the larger square. So if I had 2 rows of 20 and a square of 40, you could do that if you wanted to, and I have done that before. So okay, so we're back to the side with the tail. So now we are going to decrease again. So I'll show you how to do this one more time, and then I'll finish this square and we'll talk about how we're going to move on to the next square to get going. So we'll just knit up to this stitch marker. Now it's so much easier to use the stitch markers because then you don't have to count. It's another thing that you just don't have to think about while you're doing it. Okay, so we're 2 stitches away from the stitch marker. We're just going to knit these 2 together, drop our stitch marker over, knit 1 in the middle, drop the stitch marker, pick that stitch up, don't knit it, knit 1, drop that stitch back over, and then we're going to knit to the end. And that is it. You're just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going until I have 5 stitches left, and then I'll show you how I normally finish up these rows. Okay, so now I'm down to like 7 stitches, and normally what I do is when I get down to this many stitches, or probably like a row back, I just take the stitch markers out because there's hardly any stitches left. You can pretty well just eyeball where you're at, and you can make your decision on what you want to do and whether you want to do that or not. But yeah, so we're basically almost done here. We're going to have one more decrease row, and that's going to get us down to 3 stitches. So just knit those 2 together, and then knit this one, and then slip, knit, and then slip it back over. So there's just the 3, and then I just purl those 3 together, which is a pain in the butt sometimes, but it's okay, we'll get there. There we go. So I've purled those 3 together. Just get this needle out of the way. So that's our little square done, and you can see the little where you decrease, and that makes this nice little pattern up the middle. And because this is stocking stitch, it is going to try and curl a bit and everything, but once you get a bit of weight to it, these edges stop trying to do that and everything, and we're going to pick up these edges on this side, and that curling only really happens in the bottom rows. And really, I think this sort of blanket, you kind of want to edge it to make it nice anyway, whether you do a row of mitered squares all around the outside, or you just do something simpler, or maybe you even crochet an edge or something. I think it needs quite an edge on it, so you can just make these edges just a little bit nice, and you don't have to be so worried about making them super nice and pretty while you're actually knitting it. And then you can also knit up some of these tails, as crochet or whatever up some of these tails if you want to get rid of them as well. Alright, so now the next thing that we're going to do is get ready for our next square, which is going to go here. And what we're going to do is we are just going to pick up 19 stitches along this edge here. Okay, so normally what I do, I don't know whether you can see it there. Let's see if it's going to... There's like this you can see where there's the decreases and that come out here, and then if you look over here, there's going to be an area where you can just see this stitch here. So I normally pick up my stitches in this row here. Don't worry about that falling out there, that's fine. Let's just pull a bit more of this out so we can have a look at it and not worry about it. So you can kind of see there's like a bit of this wonky bit around the edge here, and you could pick that up. Like, it does have a sort of stitch look to it, and I'm sure if I slip stitches on each end or whatever, I could make that look really pretty, but it doesn't matter, you're not going to see it, because I'm going to pick my stitches up from in here. Okay, and then it will give it kind of an edge, and it actually adds, I think, a little bit to the stability of the blanket and the joins. If you don't put it in this bit, you do it in this first really obvious neat bit of row. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up my first stitch from there. Okay, and then I find normally, not always, pretty close to, if I skip, you see that next hole there, if I skip that hole and go in the next one, that's going to about put me in the right spot. So if that's 3 stitches, make sure you do count your initial stitch to get your 20. You've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, come through there probably, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and I always try to make a concerted effort to get the last one into the very corner there, because then it just helps your squares be a little bit more square when you go through it. So if you try and get your last stitches that you need to pick up into the very corner, you're going to get nicer squares, I think. So now I'm going to put my stitch marker on. I'm going to cast on one for the stitches in the middle, and it just makes it have a nice turn round so it's not super tight. And then all we're going to do is cast on 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then you can see how it's pretty much the same as when you started doing this edge. So you've got 20 on this side, 1 in the middle, 20 on this side. So you're just going to do the same thing now. You're just going to purl across or knit, whatever you're going to do. You just need to remember now that it's this top corner, when you're going from this top corner, that you need to decrease. I mean, it's easier if you're going to turn your piece when you do your row back, because then you just know that you need to decrease when you're looking at the right side, because this is the right side and that's going to be the back side. You can see how it gets this little seam, and I think that adds to the overall strength of the blanket. Makes for you've got a little bit of extra there, stops it from, just makes for a nicer, firmer join, I think. Anyway, up to you. But yeah, so if that's something else you could remember, if you are going to turn your work, then you just go straight across when you're on the wrong side, and you're going to decrease when you're knitting or whatever from the right side. Okay, so that's it. You're pretty much just going to do that. Now I'll show you super quickly. I'm trying not to make this video ridiculously long. So let's say that you've finished all of the squares that you want to do on this side. You've made it however wide you want it to be, and now you're looking to do your next row. To do your next row, all you're going to do is sort of the opposite to what you've done here. You're going to cast 20 stitches onto your needle, then you're going to do your stitch marker, cast one on, stitch marker, and then you're going to pick up 20 stitches across here. Okay, and that's going to start this row off for you. always try and make a concerted effort to get into like, let's see if it's going to focus into this corner here. Okay, and into this corner here. You're going to see a quite obvious sort of difference between the two squares. So this square here wants to hook into this corner here, okay? And that square there, that next square there, will want to hook into the corner of your other one. Okay, so if you've done it, if you've taken a bit of care there to make sure you get into the corners, all this little oddness will sort itself out, and you'll actually get quite an even blanket, particularly since it'll get heavier and stuff as well, depending on how big a blanket you're going to do. Okay, so you're just going to cast on 20, put your stitch marker on, cast your one for the middle, put your stitch marker on, and then pick up 20 along here, or however many it is that you're doing for your sides. Okay, so sort of the same as this, except the opposite, because in this side you pick up your 20 and then you put your stitch marker on, cast your one, put your stitch marker on, and cast your 20. Okay, and that's just how I do my blankets. Works out really well. You can do them as long and as wide as you want them to be, and you can always add more squares onto the onto this side. I'm not going to say left or right because I suck at left or right, and it really depends on how you're looking at it, but you can always add more squares onto this side provided you work from the bottom up. Okay, you got to work from the bottom up, and you just pick up the stitches on this one and pick up the stitches there. So that is one last thing to mention. When you go to do this square here, you're going to pick up the stitches off this square, do your stitch marker, cast one, stitch marker, and then go across to here. Or what you could actually do is go pick up the 20, stitch marker, pick up one from the diagonal corner across, stitch marker, and then do 20 across. Yeah, that would actually probably be better. You'll get a nicer, you'll get them all to join across sort of diagonally a little bit then too, stop you from having any sort of hole there. So that's it. Try it out. See what you think. It's a great mindless task to do that uses up heaps of yarn, and they look really, really nice, and they're super comfy because they're really stretchy. I actually prefer to do it this way now. I don't really crochet blankets anymore because in comparison I just find crochet blankets really stiff. That's not to say there's anything wrong with crocheting blankets, and if that's what you want to do, then that's awesome, but I actually find these really nice, particularly these in stocking stitch. Yeah. Anyway, see what you think, give it a try, and let me know how you go. I'd love to see some pictures or something if you want to post them up, or just let me know. And yeah, if you want to see more of this sort of stuff or anything else, then let me know in the comments.